Hello. In this video, we're going to show how to make your GUIs, your graphical interfaces, interactive so that when you press buttons or click things, events happen. So we're going to start with a simple text entry box. Make a window and make an entry. And start the program. And you have this entry box. Now it's not a very interactive program yet because no matter what I do, nothing really happens. To make it more interactive, you can get fancy and detect that every time you press a key, something happens. But simpler is just to make a button such that when the user presses the button, then we do something with that text in the box. So let's make a button, and we'll have a few buttons. So this one will say print. It'll print the contents of the entry. It'll print it to the console. Now, as is, nothing actually happens when you press the button. I don't say window when I say pack. I just say side. So there it is, but it doesn't do anything. To make it do something, it's pretty straightforward. What you have to do though, when you make the button, is you have to indicate what the function's going to be for the click, and they call that command. So what function should it execute when the click happens? And I'm gonna have to define my own function, so I'll say print entry. Now print entry is going to be a function I create. If I create it down here at the bottom, then it won't run because it hasn't heard of that function before. If I create it too far up here, I can't refer to entry because it won't know what entry is. So I'm going to make it in between, and I'll call it print entry. Has no inputs. And then what I want to do, I'll just show you that indeed it works. We'll see the hello every time I press the button. So there it is saying hello. Now to get the contents of this box and print that, instead of print hello, I'm going to print the contents of the box. That's called entry.get. Whatever your variable name is, entry or whatever, it's .get for these entry types of things. So now whatever I type is what prints. All right, so that's how you get the contents of an entry box with a button. And of course, you don't have to print it. You could do whatever. You could save it and then do something with it. I'm also going to make a button called clear. That will clear the entry. So I want to show you to do that. Make a function called clear entry. And the way you clear out whatever the user has typed is you refer to the entry box, whatever the variable is. And they have a function called delete. And delete, as you see here, takes two positions. You can delete like just the middle of what they've typed or just the last part of what they typed. But probably what you want is for the position 0 to position end. So end is a thing defined by this import here that will refer to the end of the text. So this effectively deletes everything in the box. When I press button number 2, that's called clear. So if I type stuff, I can still print it, but I can also clear it. And now when I print it, it prints nothing. So that's how you clear a box. And lastly, if you want to put text in the box without making the user type it, I'll define a function called fill entry. And you do insert, and you can insert on the right side, in the middle, whatever. Most likely you're going to insert at the beginning, and then whatever you want to say. This might come from something else, maybe another part of the GUI, a different entry or something. But here's a simple example of adding text with a function. Make a third button to make that happen. That all looks correct. So when I say fill, it inserts that text for me. If I fill it twice, actually, it'll insert the text again on the left. So if I do clear and then fill, that would be one way to have that fill text only show up once. So anyway, those are the things you can do with an entry box. You can get the value, as we see with print. You can clear the value, or you can set the value. And to do each of those actions, when you want to do it would depend on what kind of program you're building. But in this case, just to show how to do those things, we have 3 separate buttons. And each button will need a thing called command equal, and then a name of a function that you create. And that's where you do the action in that function that you create. Okay, next we want to look at list boxes. Make a window. Now list box, I'll just name it list box, but you can call it whatever you want, of course. Put it in the window, and we'll pack it. So you have a list box. Now there's no items in the list, so you can't really tell that there's a box here. Let's put some things in there. Listbox dot insert. Again, you can put something at the front or the end or whatever. I think what's common in a list box is you put stuff at the end. So I'll say end and then my item. So there it is, and see it's a list box, so you can select it. If I put a second thing, you can see that I can change what I select. All right, so there's a list box. Now, what you're probably going to have in reality is a actual list somewhere. Sorry about the dogs. So you're probably going to have a list of data like items or something. And whatever. And if you got such a list, then you don't want to do this by hand. You want to do it in a little loop. And then you would just insert item. So that they all are. Now let's make a button that adds another item to the bottom of the list. So we'll say button, maybe new item, and we'll need a command for that button, which we'll call new item. And kind of like before, our function definition for new item here should come after the list box is created because we want to refer to it, but it has to come before the button is created because we have to refer to the function. So we'll say new item, and we'll just append an item. Like it'll create the same item over and over if I keep clicking the button. But just appending to this doesn't make it appear in the box. I have to also follow it with an insert. Now I'm going to do a delete action as well in just a second here. So what would be easiest is to actually turn this into a function that I can call repeatedly. So let's call this populate list. So I can call this anytime I need that box to refresh. What I'm actually going to do first with the list box is clear it out before I refresh it. So we'll do a delete, and I think it goes again the position 0 to end. So this will take away all the elements in the list box not our actual list, but just in the display. And then it will add all the things that are currently in this list. So if this list grows, we'll just re-execute this function and the box will appear to change. So new item, and then we'll follow that with populate list, because the list contents will change. So notice there was nothing there at first until I hit new item. That's because since I turned my code to actually insert all the original items into a function, I need to execute the function at some point. I got to do it before the main loop because nothing really happens after main loop. So here, this is populating the first list, the 3 elements. All right, so there they are, and if I say new, you get more. And you can scroll. There's no scroll bar, but there's a way to get a scroll bar, but we can just ignore that. So that's how you add items. This is actually how you delete items, but the question is how you delete a specific item, like after you select it. So to show that, let's support selecting, and we'll show how to get the name of the item. So we'll make a button called print item, and it'll be print item. Now you know I can just print hello and the button should behave. What I really want to do is print the contents of whatever is selected. So I need to get the selected item. So you say list box cur selection for current selection, and let's print what that is, just see what it looks like. So if I click this and say print, it says 0, 2, and so forth. This down here is called a tuple. A tuple can contain any number of things. These tuples have one thing. And it's the position, obviously, starting at 0 at the top. So to get that 0 or the 2 out of the tuple, because I can't really do anything with the tuple, I need to use bracket 0. Like it's the first element of the tuple, which there being only one element will be that number. So now we see that it'll return the position of the item I've selected. That's not really the same thing as the item, it's just the position. So I need to convert that into an actual thing from my list. So I use that as a position in my list, and then I can print the item. Now it prints item C. And if I add new items, since these items are technically appended to this list called items, it'll print those too. So when you select something in a list box and you hit a button, you can figure out what is selected, but what you're really finding out is the position of the thing that's selected. So if you have data from somewhere else, you use that position to get to the actual data. And then lastly, let's do a delete. So you have to select the item and then you can hit delete. This is going to be a similar thing where you select it, but I'm not really going to call delete on the list box. I can delete that position, but the problem is the item will just appear again because I need to really get it out of this list, because if I ever call populate again, it just shows up again. So it's not really useful to delete it from the list box itself like we do here. We have to delete it from the original data. So after I know what the position is, I can just delete that position in the list up top here, and then I will call populate and it won't appear this time because it's actually gone. So you have to do it that way so that all the other code works still, like printing and all that. It needs to have positions that actually reflect the data. So if you do a delete in the list box, you better delete it from the actual data. All right, so this prints C correctly. If you don't do it right, you might find that it's not printing the right thing because the data has not correctly changed. So I think this is all the things that you're going to need. The only difference with the homework that's been posted with the album data is these won't be strings, they'll be little dictionaries. And so you're not really going to insert the whole dictionary. That would look kind of funny. You're going to get the title out of the album dictionary. And when you say new, it's going to have a different, it's going to put a dictionary in the list, not just an item X. And you're also going to have to add entry boxes like I just showed you a few minutes ago that will populate with the album data after you click select album or get album. And when you type new data in those boxes and you hit save, it'll save that back into the dictionaries. Let me know if you have any questions.